Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The Pet, Chapter 9. Jake did not feel the rumbling that was happening elsewhere on Deep Space Nine. At the moment, hanging from a broken ladder high above nothing in the upper pylon shaft, he had more immediate concerns on his mind. Cautiously, he stretched out his right hand while continuing to hold tight to the ladder rung with his left. His fingers brushed against thin air. The safety of the wall beams was beyond his reach. The shaft disappeared into the dimness, seemingly miles below. He tried extending his arm farther. The ladder creaked as he shifted his weight. The bolts holding the bottom section to the wall groaned. One of them snapped. What would Dad do? Jake wondered whether his father had ever been in a situation like this one. He knew a senior officer of a Starfleet ship had plenty of opportunities to face death. That was the kind of opportunity that Jake would have been glad to forego indefinitely. But here it was, and he had to do something now. If he continued to hang here, his arms would eventually get tired, and he'd fall. Or the bolts would break or loosen from the wall, and the ladder would fall, taking him with it. There was one chance. He could make one big swing that would carry him across the abyss to the far wall and safety, but he would have only one try. The effort would almost certainly pull the bolts loose from their tenuous moorings, plunging the ladder into the shaft. And if he couldn't grab onto something solid on the far wall, he'd be right behind it. After an instant of hesitation, he made his decision. Jake closed his eyes and swung his body backward. He heard the bolts grind as they tore free of the wall. Then he opened his eyes and swung forward, letting go of the ladder rung when he reached the top of his arc. Like an acrobat on a trapeze, Jake flew across the empty void. For one long moment, he was sure he wasn't going to make it. Then his hand grabbed onto a beam and he pulled himself tight against the wall. Behind him, the ladder broke free and dropped down into the dark void of the shaft, clanging again and again off the sides as it fell. Jake held tight to the beam for several minutes, shaking as he thought about what might have happened if he'd missed. Soon the shaking subsided. He had made it. He was safe. Very slowly and very carefully, Jake began to descend from the upper shaft of the pylon. He was almost back to the clubhouse level when he remembered why he was here. Where was Babe? Elsewhere, Deep Space Nine was experiencing utter chaos. The promenade was rapidly becoming a disaster zone. People fled as huge steel girders surged up through the floor of the mall like metallic prehistoric monsters. One girder shot skyward like an arrow and anchored itself in the ceiling, dangling precariously over the heads of fleeing pedestrians. One section of the balcony overlooking the promenade split apart. Only the quick reaction of one of the assistant engineers prevented several Bajoran sightseers from plunging through the crevice. Rolling shockwaves shook the station like an endless series of earthquakes and sent anything not tied down, and quite a bit that was, careening across the open spaces. An alert security guard scooped up a child who'd stumbled and was about to be rolled over by a runaway maintenance cart and hustled her to safety. People ducked and dodged objects coming at them from every direction. The promenade had become a live minefield, and no place seemed safe. But incredibly, in spite of the panic and the property damage, no one was injured by any of these flying projectiles. Quark watched in dismay as his entire stock of vintage Juno wines tumbled off the shelves, ending up in a pool of pink liquid at his feet. With his establishment collapsing around him, Quark took the only prudent course of action open to him. He hid under the bar. "Some security," Quark cursed, as yet another shelf of expensive spirits crashed down on him. "Odo, where are you when I need you?" Meanwhile, in operations, Commander Sisko is asking the same question. Where is Odo? He was on his way to the docking bay where the Ulysses is berthed. Kira replied. But I can't seem to get a fix on his communicator badge. I can't get a fix on anyone's comm badge. Another quake shook Ops. Anything that wasn't secured, again, flew across the room. The whole station seemed to be coming apart at the seams. What are the Pixians hitting us with? Cisco asked, holding onto the sides of the operations table. Unknown, Kira replied, trying to work her computer terminal. Appears to be some kind of high-frequency blasts. They're tearing the station apart. That's obvious, but what do we do about it? Fire has broken out in Docking Bay 2, Dax reported. Send an emergency team, Cisco responded. I don't have an emergency team to send, O'Brien countered. Right now, everyone I have is in at least 3 places at once. Can't you contact the Pixians? Cisco appealed to Kira. I'm sending, Commander, but if they're receiving, they're not telling me about it. At that moment, the largest quake yet struck the station. We can't take this much longer, Cisco thought. Odo, you better come up with something fast. With the station coming apart, Darm struggled back toward where the runabouts were docked. Under the circumstances, with the docking bays in chaos, a large ship had no chance to escape, but a smaller runabout might sneak away in the confusion. Darm did not mind deserting a sinking ship, even if he had to leave everyone else behind. Maybe not everyone, for it was at that moment that Darm saw Babe. The furry little alien creature was sitting in the middle of the corridor, almost as if he were waiting for the spacer. Darm took it as a sign that his luck was finally changing for the good. He smiled. Gotcha, Darm said as he grabbed Babe. Surprisingly, the creature made no attempt to escape. At least I'll leave this cursed place with a few bars of gold-pressed latinum in my pockets. Darm whistled as he carried the creature down the corridor. Darm found the alien Forsh near the airlock to his ship. None of the airlocks was functioning, so there was no way to get aboard. Even if there were a way, nothing is leaving the station, wailed Forsh. We're all doomed. Then you won't mind paying me for delivering this? Darm said as he shoved Babe forward. What am I going to do with that thing when this whole station is falling apart? Frankly, I don't really care, was Darm's hard response. But we made a deal, and you're going to honor it. Darm took out his phaser to emphasize the point. While nodding, Forsh took something from his belt pouch. It was a slender card that resembled a computer microcircuit board. It was actually a bearer note that could be exchanged for 5 bars of gold-pressed latinum, with no questions asked, anywhere in the Federation. This is the amount we agreed upon, Forsh said as he handed the card to Darm. Darm took the card, then reached into Forsh's belt pouch and removed 4 more of the cards. I've just upped the price. When the alien tried to stop him, Darm shoved him back and raised the phaser threateningly. Any complaints? Forsh looked at the phaser and at the harsh expression on Darm's face. Another quake hit the station. Forsh stumbled against the wall. Take what you want, he told Darm wearily. Just go and leave me. Darm started to exit, then stopped. He looked down at Babe, who'd been sitting nearby during all this. He's all yours, Forsh. Suddenly, the fuzzy creature rose up on his hind legs, except it wasn't the creature that was rising. It was something else. Babe was becoming Odo. You! The shape-shifting sheriff! Darm roared. The metamorphosis was complete, and Odo was once more his humanoid self. Security Chief is a proper title. Odo took a step forward. You are under arrest. Darm focused the phaser on him. You got no charges. Selling something you don't own is a start? Darm looked around. There's nothing here that I tried to sell. Which was perfectly true, since Babe had been replaced by Odo. The real charge, Odo explained, is abduction of the Pixian prince. What prince? I don't know what you're talking about. I've just checked the logs of the Ulysses. It did enter the star system of the Pixians. You were on one of their moons. So? I didn't take no prints. I believe you did, Odo asserted. Then where is he? That is what you're going to tell me. Darm raised the phaser. I'm telling you nothing, lawman. The spacer fired at Odo at point-blank range. The beam hit Odo full in the chest. Then the beam did a remarkable thing. It bounced off his chest and ricocheted back at Darm. The reflected beam struck the spacer and doubled him over as though he had been hammered by a fist. Forsh watched all this with amazement. Odo smiled. He tapped his bulked-up chest. It's what old Earth lawmen used to call a bulletproof vest. Of course, this material is much more efficient and elastic enough to stretch into any shape, he added as his chest assumed its normal size. The security chief knelt next to the unconscious spacer. Fortunately, the reflected blast only stunned him. Unfortunately, that is enough to keep him sleeping for quite a while, which means I can't discover what he knows about the prince for some time. Odo returned the cards Darm had attempted to steal from Forsh. I suggest in the future you find yourself a more reputable business associate. Another quake rumbled through the station. Odo grabbed the unconscious Darm by the collar and dragged him toward the turbo lifts. Around him, the station seemed to be on the verge of disintegrating. Of course, Odo remarked. At the moment, none of us seems to have a future to speak of. Chapter 10. Jake was also worried about his future. He had searched most of the upper sections of the pylon and found no trace of Babe. He feared that the alien, like other sick or injured creatures, might have crawled into some hole for security. In such cases, the animal usually died because no one was there to help him. Jake did not want that to happen to Babe. He had to find him, and by what might be termed a lucky accident, he did find him. Adjacent to the construction module they had turned into a clubhouse was a sealed hutch where Cardassian workmen had locked their tools. Not only did the Cardassians steal everything from Bajor that could be crammed into the hold of a spaceship, they were also quite proficient at pillaging from each other. The reason Jake had bypassed the hutch was that he believed it was sealed shut, but returning to the clubhouse, Jake stumbled on a loose cable and fell against the door of the hutch, causing it to swing open. Babe was lying on the top shelf of the hutch, keeping to the shadows. In the faint light that filtered in when Jake propped the door open, he could see Babe's golden fur. It seemed to have gotten lighter and appeared to be glowing. Then as he came closer, he realized that he was not seeing Babe's fur, but golden strands of silk. Jake started to touch it, then stopped. If Babe was injured, this might be part of his healing process. He didn't want to do something that would harm Babe. Where were Nog and Dr. Bashir? Then, as if in response to his urgent thoughts, Jake heard approaching footsteps. Jake! Nog called out. I'm here, Jake replied, stepping out of the locker. Nog ran up, followed by Dr. Bashir. You took long enough, Jake commented to Nog. He didn't want to come, Nog replied, glancing at Bashir. But I said it was the only way to get you to leave the pylon. You have to get out of here, Dr. Bashir told Jake. The station is under attack, and these pylons may not last much longer. Suddenly, another quake shook Deep Space Nine. As far from the center of the station, the impact was muffled, but they felt it all the same. What's that? Jake asked as he regained his balance. Space quakes, Nog said. They've been happening all over the station. That's why we must go now, Bashir implored. Jake did not move. Not without Babe. He was determined not to leave his furry friend no matter what. He pointed inside, and Dr. Bashir entered the storage locker. Extraordinary. Nog was also bewildered at what was happening to their pet. Babe's dying. The Ferengi started to run to Babe, but Bashir put out an arm and gently halted him. Wait. Now Bashir began to act like a doctor. Holding his medical tricorder in front of him, he moved toward Babe, being careful not to alarm the creature. But there was little chance of that. Babe was occupied with other things. Growing, slender golden threads were rapidly encircling his furry body. "Do you know what's happening to him?" Jake asked, hoping the doctor would fix whatever it was that was wrong. Bashir did not immediately reply. He was too busy analyzing the readings on his tricorder. "This is absolutely incredible," he finally said aloud. "What's incredible?" Nog demanded. "Babe is—" Bashir stopped. When it came to medicine, Jake knew that the doctor was determined to be accurate in his diagnosis. Sometimes his true brilliance was concealed by his halting manner of making a statement. "I think," Bashir rephrased what he started to say, "that Babe is undergoing a transformation." "Is that good?" Nog asked. "A transformation?" Jake did not understand what Bashir was talking about. "Like," Bashir thought for a moment, "you know how a caterpillar turns into a butterfly?" Jake and Nog stared at him. They didn't get it. He tried again. "Babe is spinning a cocoon." "Babe is like a caterpillar?" Jake asked. Bashir nodded. "Yes, exactly. Babe has reached the end of one stage of his life and is about to enter a new one." "Like growing up?" Nog wondered. "In a way, yes. People go from childhood to adulthood, and our bodies undergo significant changes. We call it puberty when a boy becomes a man or a girl becomes a woman." "But what's Babe going to become?" "That is a very good question, Jake, but one for which I have no answer." All during their discussion, the golden threads had continued to wrap around Babe. By now, he was completely enveloped in the strange cocoon. There was no sign of the furry little creature that had been their pet. "But we'll see very soon," Bashir added. "Doesn't it take a caterpillar a long time to become a butterfly?" Nog asked. "Yes, but different species change at different rates. My tricorder readings indicate that that Babe's metamorphosis is happening very fast." Bashir kneeled and invited the boys to do likewise. "We are about to witness one of nature's miracles." At the same time, in another part of the space station, Commander Sisko was witnessing something quite different: the apparent destruction of Deep Space Nine. Operations looked like a disaster zone. Broken beams were everywhere. Several wall panels had broken loose, making it difficult to move around the room. Some of the workstations were overturned. Debris littered the floor and shifted position every time another of the rumbling quakes shook the station. Reports of similar scenes of chaos came in from the rest of Deep Space Nine. These were only terrified verbal descriptions of havoc and devastation, since many of the monitors were not working. That was what Sisko hated the most. He was nearly blind as far as the damage to his station was concerned. "I don't understand it," O'Brien kept saying whenever he confronted a new emergency. "According to the few readout panels that are still working, nothing is wrong." Kira scowled. "Look around, Chief. This is not nothing." Sisko had ordered the station's phasers to return fire on the Pixian ship, but the blast may as well have been aimed at empty space for all the damage they did. Dax was at a loss to explain it. "In 300 years, the Trill officer stated, I've never seen anything like this. It's not that the Pixian shields are powerful, it's that their ship doesn't appear to be there at all." At that moment, another sharp quake jolted the room. The walls seemed to scream in agony from the shock. "I don't know how much longer we're going to hold together, Commander," O'Brien said, struggling to regain his balance. Surrounded by damaged equipment and a crew that was very close to the breaking point, Benjamin Sisko desperately needed a miracle. A miracle was exactly what Jake and Nog were waiting for in the tool hutch in the upper docking pylon. It was what Dr. Julian Bashir had predicted, and as they watched, it began. The cocoon that surrounded Babe was pulsating with a strange inner energy. The slender golden threads began to vibrate like the strings of a violin, making a sound unlike any they had ever heard. They covered their ears to blot out the siren wail that became so loud it was painful. And still, the noise continued to reverberate inside their heads. The noise was particularly painful to Nog, who could finally take it no longer and bolted from the locker. Jake was about to follow him when he felt Bashir touch his arm. Jake responded and looked at where the doctor was pointing. The cocoon was exploding. No, not exploding. Jake revised his first impression. It was evaporating. The golden threads expanded and disappeared. Suddenly, from inside the disintegrating cocoon, a bright light shone. Jake and Bashir shielded their eyes from the light that filled the hutch like the flash from an exploding star. The light lasted less than a microsecond, yet even when he opened his eyes again, the residual effects from the flash made after images continue to pop in front of Jake's eyes like balloons. He thought he was blind and would never see again. But the balloons soon faded. Then for a moment, everything was a blur. Finally, his vision cleared, and what he saw was indeed a miracle.